I found out that I had joint hypermobility. So from a very young age, we're talking middle school, I was put on at the recommendation of my physician, I was put on high dose Tylenol and ibuprofen to the tune of 800 or more milligrams every 4 hours, alternating for years.
Friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to episode number 13. Today's guest is Carrie, Bennett. As a college athlete, supposedly at the pinnacle of health, Carrie began suffering from chronic joint issues and insomnia. After her first child was born, she developed debilitating stomach pain, adrenal fatigue, and brain fog. Carrie is armed with a BS in biology and an MS in nutrition and certifications as a personal trainer, massage therapist, and breathing coach, but she still couldn't find the root of her issues. That's when she found quantum biology. Now, as an online educator, clinician, and faculty member of the Quantum Biology Collective, Carrie's mission is to teach her clients how to create a healing environment by applying quantum health strategies around light, water, electrons, and mitochondrial support. Given these tools, clients who have spent years trying to improve their health, just as Carrie did, finally experience powerful healing and lasting benefits. So friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to Carrie, Bennett. Friends, welcome back to the Decentralized Health Podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest. Today, my guest is Carrie Bennett. Carrie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, my darling.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm very excited to hear this story. So please, for people that have been maybe living under a rock and don't know who you are, please introduce yourself to everybody. And then obviously, please just start your story wherever you'd like to start.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is such a cool opportunity to kind of think about where I would want this story to begin. I've always been into health and fitness. I was a pretty good athlete growing up, and I ultimately played sports in college as well. And I think my understanding of, or my broadening of human health, because in growing up, it was a very traditional paradigm, right? Lots of antibiotics, yep. Right? You got strep throat. Okay, let's get your tonsils out. Let's get your wisdom teeth out. Let's do all those things. But I still could balance that with the fact that I understood my body in a different way through being a competitive athlete. And when I was supposed to, because my teachers thought I was fairly smart, and I was supposed to go to med school or get a PhD. So I graduated with an undergraduate degree in biology with a specialization in both micro and some neuromechanisms. And wow. I could have done those types of things. And at the time I said to myself, that doesn't feel right. Yes, I can, right? I could go to med school. I could get my PhD in these things, but it just wasn't where I was being called. And I distinctly remember going to my volleyball coach's office, just kind of having a breakdown, like at a young age, an existential crisis, like what am I supposed to do in this world? And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to go to massage therapy school. And I had never had a massage before. And so I don't really know where that came from, but I went with it. And I then put myself, having been an athlete, I became a personal trainer, fitness instructor, and I put myself through massage therapy school. And it gave me a completely different lens of the body. Instead of understanding the more reductionist mechanistic pathways that I learned in undergrad, I started to understand the body as a whole and that energy flow. There was this thing that I had never thought about before, was this concept of the flow of energy and how knots and adhesions in our tissue could actually block that flow of energy, and how you could actually start to reestablish it and have improved health outcomes. I distinctly remember holding on to, my specialization was acupressure, where you take your thumb essentially and you put sustained pressure in the dense knotted tissue, the dense knotted fascia. And it would feel like a rock at first. And then after about 2 to 5 minutes, it would just soften, but then you'd come to another rock, hold it, soften. And so I had the opportunity to stay with a tissue for a long period of time and feel the changes. And I started to recognize at that moment that I could actually talk in my mind to the person's body, and it would help me change how I would angle the pressure of my thumb to release whatever tension was there. And as I started to do that, I was like, this is weird. I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm doing this, but it definitely, but it definitely helps. And it definitely made me feel like, wow, I could really, I think, help support this person through whatever their body is looking to release in this session by doing that. And as I started to do that, I would also be drawn to certain knots more so than others. And those knots, I found that when I would hold that sustained pressure there, I would, when a release happened, like when my thumb would start to sink all of a sudden, there would be a wave of energy that was released that sometimes felt like, it could feel like nausea. It could feel like, for me, it could feel like pain. I could feel emotions. I could get a flash or an image of some event that wasn't my own event in life. They could start having different emotions, laughter, different, just different states that would just all of a sudden appear out of nowhere. And that's where I was just like, wow, our body is amazing. And I only know the very tip of the iceberg in terms of what might be happening. Like at that point, I had no concept of quantum health or quantum biology. And so it was with that background of massage therapy and personal training that I opened a wellness studio. And this was about 2 decades ago now. And that afforded me, I could work with physical fitness, I could work cardiovascular fitness, and I felt like I was doing good by people. I was helping them, but then about 13 years ago, almost 14 now, when my first child was born, my own health took a severe turn. And I wasn't enough to say, oh, you're a new mom now, right? So this is how it is. Because it was the issue. Not only was I exhausted all the time, but I actually couldn't sleep. My digestion just went disastrous. I couldn't eat or digest anything. I would feel joint pain, just inflamed all over, puffy. And I was like, okay, well, I feel like I'm fairly well equipped because I have more of this allopathic approach and understanding of the body from undergrad. And then I've got this physical fitness and more Eastern philosophy. And it just didn't move the needle for me the way I thought, okay, there's got to be something else. And at the time, I actually then put myself through a graduate degree in nutrition, clinical nutrition, thinking, oh, nutrition is it. It's the it factor. It has to heal me if I can figure out the correct nutrition. And I did so many nutrition protocols, gut healing protocols, you name it. And it helped a little bit. It was certainly a piece of the puzzle, but I was still feeling like garbage. And I wasn't, again, ready to accept that this was supposed to be the status of my health for the next however long I was set to live this life. And that's when I was up one night, which I don't recommend people do, but I was up one night on my phone and scrolling, and I'm like, what am I missing about human health? And I don't even remember the search parameters that I put in, but I found a blog from Dr. Cruz that mentioned the words circadian rhythm. That very next day, I purchased the book, Jerry Pollack's book on the 4th phase of water, and I purchased Maywan Ho's book, which she talks about kind of like the biophysics of the water in our body. And it opened my mind up to a completely different viewpoint about what I was missing when it came to optimizing my health. And after studying that for an extended period of time, I finally felt confident to apply a couple of key strategies involving light and exclusion zone water and things like that. And I felt better in 3 days than I had in years of really myopically focusing on my nutrition or my movement practices. And that was when I just went all in on this. I just dove down this rabbit hole. I have bookshelves lined with really cool books that I never would have been exposed to. And yeah, this is now what I'm excited to do to help people, because it's just, I think, a missing factor about restoring the human body, mind, and spirit back to a natural setting so that we instinctively know how to heal.
Amazing. Wow. Okay. So there's quite a few bits to unpack there. So this first impulse to go to the massage school, where do you feel that was a universal gift, that was a download to set you on that path to get you to where you are right now?
It had to be. I mean, it had to be, because like I had no experience with massage. And the very first time I ever received a massage was when I was enrolled as a student in the massage therapy program. So, and my family, we didn't experiment. Like my parents never went to get massages. My family, it just wasn't something that was in my frame of reference. And so looking back on it, and I'm certain this happened, people see this, right? Looking back on it, I do believe it was some form of a divine intervention, a download, a spiritual guidance pushing me more out of that allopathic traditional paradigm and into exploring something that was completely different. But now through my current lens, I can appreciate the body so much differently because I had that experience through massage.
Definitely 100%. I think anything which is hands-on therapy like that, it gives you a very different understanding of energetics necessarily. So when I was 23, very similar to you, I got guided down the Reiki healing route. So by the time I was 25, I was a Reiki master. And so I was having, and when you were saying all the experiences you were getting from the pressure going through and then being guided to certain places over others, in Reiki, you have a particular order that you're supposed to go through the whole body, but I never did that. I'd start at the head and then I would let my hands take me. It was almost like energy was just taking me where it needed to go. And I would feel things, I would see things, I would experience things, which on reflection, when they finished and I would speak to them, I say, oh, I saw this or I felt this. They were like, I was seeing that while you were doing it. And I could feel your hands were here, but you were there. Like there was a massive change in energetics. And it opens you up to so many different perceptions of what can happen inside the body and what gets stored where, because obviously you're dealing with the energetics within, and I was dealing with the auric torus field without. And it's all connected. There's all that kind of that, as I said before we started, that lovely word, that interdigitation of all those things. And it just always gave me a completely different understanding of the body, going from that more Eastern approach first of all, which has that much more open-minded approach to what could potentially be going on in the body. And listening to your story, you've gone through many different layers, not just of the body but of understanding of the body. So my next question was, do you feel that if that first part of your life where you went through your study and you're doing all the biochemical stuff, and then you went into the massage and you went into personal training and you did all of that, if you hadn't done that and you just started and only did the quantum stuff, do you feel you would have had such a dramatic shift? Or do you feel that because you had all of that lined up already, that was the piece, that was the missing piece, that like kind of like that 80-20, so to speak? You had the 80% already. This was the 20-30%, which was that needle mover for you.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I've never actually looked at it as that, but 100%. I needed that exact journey. I needed that exact progression for me to appreciate when I started understanding about more the biophysics of the body and the biofield, like you were saying as well, the energetic field. And that's where it's really important as well, because I think as a clinician, I have people come to me all the time and they're like, should I do cold plunges? Should I do this? It's like we become myopically focused on the one thing. Yeah. And it's never just the one thing, right? Yeah. It's a layering on, and it's an observing the body and layering and observing and layering and when we do it with that approach, people are like, well, what you talk about light, it must have made all the difference in the world. I'm like, well, it did. It made a huge difference. But if I were to list all of the things which I've done, I literally at one point listed, this is probably about a year and a half ago now, I listed all of the changes I had made in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, what habits that I've switched, added. It was over 200 things. And so for me to then just say, oh, it's just this one thing, it's not possible. It can't possibly be just one thing. But I can also not give this list to you and have you get the same experience as I had. I can't give that list to a client and have them get the same experience that I had. So I really think it's important to say, okay, in each of these exposures, what can I take from it? How can I test it out? How can I observe how my body is responding to it? And then just have that layer of introspection where we say, yes, this feels supportive and it feels like it's something I want to continue. And then you'll be guided to the next thing. Or no, this, I'm glad I tested this out, but it really didn't support me, at least not at this time. Some of those things might come back to you again. And so I really truly believe it had to be this journey and this progression to lead me to where I am today.
Amazing. So you mentioned briefly when you were young that you had antibiotics and all those other types of things going on. So what was your health journey like when you were a child? Like were you a reasonably well child and it was just a couple of things, or were you a sickly child and you had everything under the sun? That was me. So what was that journey like for you?
You know what? I was a healthy child, but I was a healthy child in a household that wasn't the healthiest. Now, emotionally, I had the most amazing family, right? So supportive. but my dad smoked 2.5 packs a day inside of the house. And so we were never, fresh air wasn't really a thing. Like I didn't go on screens all, but it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we got to get fresh air. It was not an ideal household. So if I think I was set up ultimately, if I had poor mitochondrial function upon birth, that I would have been worse than I was. The most that I dealt with two things pretty significantly in my childhood. I dealt with chronic strep infections and strep throat infections. And then I found out that I had joint hypermobility. So from a very young age, we're talking middle school, I was put on at the recommendation of my physician, I was put on high dose Tylenol and ibuprofen to the tune of 800 or more milligrams every 4 hours, alternating for years.
Wow.
And so, I think all of these things ultimately contributed to not being in the best health by the time my son, a lot of little hits, if you will, but kind of in spite of all that, I didn't have any major things, if you will, but I don't think any of that stuff really helped me.
No, definitely not. Wow. And so how did the hypermobility, did it impact or did it change the way that you trained, looked after yourself physically? Because you say you were very kind of active in your physical kind of part of your life, like in that sense of like the personal training and the physical sport and all that stuff. So did it change anything?
Over time it did. And I truly believe that I could attribute my hypermobility and the trend that I'm seeing now, because hypermobility is through the roof. And it's not just because it was underdiagnosed. I truly believe it has to do with our increased glyphosate exposure and how that affects the collagen, and how the collagen can hold strength and tensegrity, right? Support our joints. And so I believe that I just reached a threshold where halfway through high school, I started dislocating things. So I dislocated this finger, I dislocated my shoulder, all throughout college, I dislocated both. I've dislocated, 40 different things.
Wow.
And by dislocation, they would dislocate and then pop right back in, with the exception of 2. But then those did require surgery. So I had many, many surgeries as well. And I do attribute that to the fact that the glyphosate changes how we can hold water in our bodies, changes how the collagen can fold in our bodies. And that means that my body was not as able to distribute force in conjunction with the types of activities that I was doing. So I was a collegiate volleyball player, and there's a lot of force that we're going to put on our shoulders, and there's a lot of force we're going to put on our knees. And there came a critical point where my body was unable to do that.
So did you have to stop eventually then because of that?
I was out for an entire season because of shoulder surgery. And I graduated from college. I played in a pickup basketball league, and I completely dislocated and tore everything in my knee twice. And so, there was times where I'd have to stop, but I love movement so much. I would go through that rehab process and get back up on the horse, if you will. And then you just continue on. However, I also found that this was another thing. I've never even mentioned this ever before, but as I was kind of going through that, I had the opportunity to go to physical therapy school to be a physiotherapist, and get a PhD in that, because I'm thinking, well, wow, I got a lot of joint injuries. I got this background in exercise science and exercise ed, so maybe that could be a pathway for me. But then I sat in order to apply to those PhD programs. I sat in on a 100-hour observation at a physical therapy clinic, and it was, again, so myopic. It was, your wrist is an issue. Let's just do these wrist exercises, as opposed to let's see how the wrist is connected to the elbow, is connected to the shoulder, to the posture, to the hydration status. What foods are you eating? And so again, it's I just realized over time, like with all my exposures, that everything became way too myopic. And I think quantum health afforded me the opportunity to view the whole body, and light doesn't just affect one joint. Light doesn't just affect one cell or one organ system. Understanding exclusion zone water in the body doesn't just affect one organ or cell. It affects the body from a much broader perspective. And I think that's what truly drew me to that, because I realized, oh gosh, I'm applying this because I wanted it to improve my sleep, which it absolutely did, but my digestion healed in the process. So it was like, wow, this is cool. This is something where I feel like I truly feel like it's a foundational holistic practice. And it's through just seeing kind of the more myopic opportunities that I would have had that allowed me to pivot and appreciate this so much more.
I think that's an incredible hero's journey to be able to go on, because without, I think it was Steve Jobs that said, like, it's easy to join the dots looking backwards, right? Because then you can see where you've got to at this point. And so what were when you got into the quantum and you read those amazing books, they're incredible books. They're actually, two of those books were the first two that I read, and then I've just got into the other ones. I think it was Fourth Phase of Water was the latter one that I read, but again, like, Pollock's work's incredible. Hence why I'm drinking out of the quantum structured water, and it's all vortex as well.
Yep.
But what were the instant things that you applied? Like because obviously when you first get into quantum, without your knowledge background, because obviously you've had an experience in so many things, and you're obviously very, very clever, you were probably able to apply more things quicker than most people would. But what were what were the three biggest levers that you pulled from the quantum aspect when you first applied it?
The three biggest ones were morning light exposure, blocking artificial light if I woke up before sunrise or after sunset, and filtering, restructuring the water that I drank, and being aware of that through a lens of hydration, like the hydration status of my body. And that seems so simple, but honestly, I mean, I was on extensive supplement protocols and elimination diets. We're talking like 3 pill boxes, morning, lunch, and evening, dozens of supplements a day. And it didn't touch anywhere near what those 3 practices did.
And did you find that once you got those 3 practices in, you either got more out of those supplementations, or you had to take less?
Had to take less. I had to take less. Do you know the coolest progression in this whole thing? Because now that I've been doing this for, probably about 12, 13 years now, and have seen so many people do this, as well as I started coaching it in my clients. What I started to realize that is the very coolest was that the more I went outside and would earth my feet and connect to the natural light, and I love just tree gazing and gazing at the sky, and the more that I just recognize that, wow, I feel better when I do that. And yes, in the morning is when I started, but just, little breaks throughout the day, even if it's a 3-minute little break between meetings. And I do that. Not only did I feel better, like have the energy, the focus, concentration, I started to connect so much more deeply to my intuition. I call it my drop box. This little drop box opened, and I started to recognize that voice. I started to recognize that drop box. I started to honor it and trust it. And I'm not alone in that. The number of people that have come to me who have started where I started, which is like, okay, let me just tell me when to get the light exposure. Just tell me a couple of habits to start doing, who then apply this, because this became a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle. These are not like hacks. It's not a protocol, right? This became a lifestyle. And I've now had countless people now that I'm just blessed to work with, so many who have had that same experience, done it long enough, have that intuition turned on to say, I could literally open a supplement cabinet up and nowadays today be like, I do want to take that one, because something about my body is calling towards that there's an energetic exchange there that my body is asking for it. And that never, ever would have happened, 15 years ago.
Joe, I noticed exactly the same thing. Like, I've been meditating since I was 13, and I'm 44 now. So I've been meditating for a very, very long time, and I would always get downloads and I'd always be connected, but I would phase in and out of that kind of thing. And if I didn't do the meditations, if I didn't do those types of things, the signal almost got a bit weaker. What I've noticed now with being more in nature, and I'm the same as you, I will find parks are fine, but I will find trees and woods and forests. That's where I love to be.
Same.
And when I'm there, the amount of downloads that I get just creatively are incredible. But then when I'm looking at the food that I'm going to have for the day, or again, the supplements that I might be taking for that day, the intuition, I don't even think, it just happens. I reach for something, or I'll go to grab a particular food out. I'm like, no, I don't want that today. Like, it's that intuitive knowing. And I've also noticed that when I meditate now, it doesn't take me any time at all just to drop in, and I'm there. And even if I'm doing Tai Chi, I can be there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I'm completely unaware that I've been there for that length of time. It doesn't feel like that length of time. The connection just seems to be instantaneous, just by being more earthed, more in nature. And the more that I do, the stronger that connection becomes, which I think is incredible. I think it's what's missing for a lot of people, is that stillness, that time with themselves where they can receive, and I say this to my clients a lot of the time. I'm like, giving and receiving are 2 very different things. And when we are always doing, which is very yang energy, we can't receive, because yin is the empty vessel. That's the part that needs that receivership, and that kind of that waiting for that thing to fill the bowl, right? So it's only in that stillness that you get those answers to those questions you keep asking, like, why isn't this working? Why haven't I done that? What's going on here? You never get those answers until you stop giving of yourself and allow the reception to come in and pick up that signal. And then you'll get those answers. And it's through being outside more. I totally agree with you 100%. And I've never thought of it that way. I haven't actually thought of it, to be fair.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, that's so beautifully stated. I also like to state it as like, when there's so much noise, right? There's non-native EMFs, and the way to describe this with people is like, my body is made of this structured water. I'm literally an antenna, picking up everything. And so a lot of the time these days, like and everyone has had this experience or knows this experience, where I could literally take a handheld radio, I could turn it on and tune it to a station, and it would pick up a signal, right? It would pick up the song, the weather, whatever might be going through that radio station at the time. But that's just noise in my environment. It's noise in my body. And in the same way, the same reason why radio stations or broadcast stations want to ground their antenna into the earth is because you can discharge the noise and enhance the signal. You enhance the signal to noise ratio. So you can connect more strongly to the signal. And for me, that signal is the Schumann resonance that organizes my brainwaves into that calm, creative alpha rhythm, where I am such a better receiver. That a calm, creative, and I can still be in beta, right? I can still, like, if something were coming down the path at me when I'm walking in the woods, I would still know how to react. I'm not in la la land, but being in that calm, creative alpha state really, I think, is what has opened my brain up to, just like you said, in the woods when I'm earthed and grounded, it's just download, download, download.
Fascinating. I did not know that about the radio stations grounding it for that reason. That makes grounding makes so much sense now when it comes to receiving all the signals and stuff. That's incredible.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. Okay, so you've touched on it a few times, and it's not something that I've actually had anybody on yet to talk about specifically, or talk in as much depth as I know that you can. The water side of things, the structured water. I'm not at the exclusion zone. I'm not going to go into it because you the way that I've got your courses, by the way, your practitioners courses. So I've listened to them, and the way that you put it across is fantastic. So I would love to, for the listeners who aren't aware of this fourth phase of water, the structured water, all those types of things, explain that to them for me, please.
Certainly. This as a clinician was the most rewarding thing to learn. I am forever grateful for Jerry Pollack, Maewon Ho, the pioneers in this water space, because when I started to understand that the water in our bodies was different than liquid water in a glass, then that's what I was taught in undergraduate school. I mean, we didn't make note of it differently in massage therapy school and in graduate school. When I realized that the water inside of us was different and had different properties because of it, it has simplified my health recommendations drastically. So now what I want people to realize is that the water inside of us, yes, we might hear different statistics, right? We might hear that we're 60 to 70% water. Certainly, percentage by volume, absolutely we are. Or that, like, as we age, we start to dehydrate. We absolutely do. But what I want people to realize is, if I were by molecular count to lay out all the molecules in the body, so that would be, say, I'm going to lay out all these proteins and the glucose and the hormone, 99 of them would be water, H2O, and one of them would be a bigger molecule. So 99 out of 100 molecules in the body are water. Huge, right? So as a clinician, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been literally addressing the 1%. What happens if I try to optimize the 99%? It just, it's like mind-blowingly obvious when you think about it that way. And so I started to. And so what that I realized then, through Jerry's work, through Maewon Ho's work, through Amelia Donkudic, some amazing researchers, I began to realize that water inside of us is in a completely different texture, a completely different structure than liquid water in a glass. So we're taught that there's 3 phases of water: solid, ice, liquid, just regular old liquid water, and a vapor, like a steam. But what Jerry found was that when water is inside of our physical bodies, is next to a biological surface, or it structures itself in a way that turns it into a gel-like consistency. And so he calls it a 4th phase of water. And so the way that you'd be like, well, how does water do that? Well, I like people to kind of compare this juxtaposition of, what do water molecules do when they're in a solid state? So everyone knows H2O, very simple molecule where you have one oxygen in the middle and then two hydrogens coming off each side, or one hydrogen coming off each side. If I were to see how those water molecules were linked together in ice, they would be forming hexagonal rings. So these very structured, ordered organization, which gives the water that solid consistency. If we juxtapose that with water in its liquid state, the water molecules are way less organized. They're interacting with other molecules, but without a lot of rhyme or reason. There's not a lot of structure to it. When we look at the water inside of our bodies, Jerry found that it also organizes itself in a very structured way, very similar to what we would see if we were to look at the water as ice, but it retains the property of a liquid. It's that gel-like consistency. And he called it EZ water, or exclusion zone water, because when water is structured in that form, it excludes things. It literally pushes stuff away from the biological surface upon which the water is connected to. So you got a biological surface, you've got this exclusion zone water. So not only do you have this zone here where there's just structured water, but what Jerry also found was that this exclusion zone water is negatively charged. So, which is unusual, because if I were to add up all the protons and electrons in liquid water in a glass, they would cancel each other out and they would be neutral. The protons and the electrons would balance each other out. So water in this fourth phase inside of our cells, this gelled water, is negatively charged. And forever, it's been known that the cells, the interior of our cells, the membranes, the exterior of our cells need to be negatively charged for health and vitality. So a cell is healthy when it has this charge. But what was invoked in the research for decades was this concept of, let's pump these ions in and then pump these other ions out. So pump charges in, pump charges out to maintain this negatively charged milieu inside of the cell. Because they never thought to think about the water. And Jerry was like, well, wait, what if the water alone, or at least for a majority of that cellular charge, that negative charge, what if we can ascribe that to the structured water inside of the cell? And that a cell that's full of this structured water has all the energy and vitality it needs, whereas a cell that's drained of this structured water, does not have as much of it, all of a sudden doesn't have the energy to run all of its programs and tasks, doesn't have the vitality. And it's through that lens of what charges up that water battery versus what drains it that I've started to implement health strategies with clients. And it has simplified things so much. Beyond that structured water, May Wan Ho referred to it as a liquid crystal. So ice in its solid state is very crystalline, very ordered. Those water molecules are very ordered. And so we have, that would be a crystal, but we still have properties of a liquid. So she calls it a liquid crystal inside of us. And so then, Mark, my brain goes, well, what are liquid crystals good for? I'm certain we've studied liquid crystals. Well, certainly physics has studied it, because they are broadband antenna of all sorts of frequency information. They can receive, they can transmit, they can modify the signal. So essentially, being in this fourth phase of water, this water body in this liquid crystalline state, we are also antenna for frequency information, which connected me to all sorts of fun stuff, like understanding the morphogenetic field, the Akashic record, the biofield. I digress, but that is how cool that water is inside of our bodies, because not only is it synonymous with health and vitality, but it also then connects us more broadly to the invisible energy and information that's around us.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned the Akashic records. I was actually going to say that when it came to you getting that download for your massage kind of course. So how would you say then that allows more, I guess, receivership of things like the Akashic records and the way that our body generates this field and all those types of things?
I just think that I think what we can be is we can be a tunable antenna, right? And so I am not at this level. However, I have heard of and read many different people who have reached this point of mastery where they can essentially focus on a flower and get the complete download of all the information that they need to know about that particular flower, that it would have taken them perhaps longer than their life cycle to be able to get all of that information. And I believe those types of experiences, when we have correct the ability to concentrate, clear our mind, stillness, meditation, right? When we've developed that skill, I believe that's what the water in our bodies allows us to receive that information because of the liquid crystallinity that it holds. It's in that antenna state. Yeah. And so that means that if I wanted to tap into other information as well, I would have the ability to do so. And so, I mean, we can go from there, but that's just the opening on that one.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's fascinating because I mentioned this to you, I can't remember it was when we were recording or before we started, but that my ex-client is a shaman, and I spoke to his elder, and I said to him when I went and had a shamanic healing with him, I was like, with your medicine, whether it's utilizing something like Wayusa or cat's claw or what everybody knows like ayahuasca, how did you know to combine the plants in that way? Like, how did you know that they would do those things if you boiled them to this temperature or took this amount of this and this amount of that? He said, oh, the plants told us. That explains what you're saying right there. That's how they can communicate with it, because they are more charged than we are, because they're in nature, grounded all the time, which leads me to my next question then. So obviously, you know, structured like water, all these types of things, how would we have got that type of water in nature when we were more ancestrally based?
That's spring water, right? That's spring water, or it's pristine glacial runoff. Water in nature goes through an entire cycle, right? It goes through a journey, and it's the full maturation of that journey of water. Let's say it starts deep within the earth and then starts to bubble its way up and vortex its way up through rock to eventually become a spring. That journey took years. That journey allowed the water to interact with all sorts of mineral frequencies as it was going through the rock. It allowed it to experience all the different seasons, different weather, different lunar cycles, and all of that then from actual physical minerals to just all of that frequency information that essentially as it vortexes, it's picking up frequencies, and we're going to talk about a vortex and how it does that in a second. But it's literally that information is then in that spring water. So when we drink that spring water, it is full of energy and information from the earth, besides, yes, being water that hydrates our blood and that will bathe the space between the cells and help with, nutrient delivery, waste removal. That's certainly a part of it, but there's a huge frequency component as well. And so when I said before that water in its liquid state is not structured, that's not entirely true. It's not as structured or organized as you would find water as ice, or water as it's in this fourth phase of exclusion zone water inside of us. When water is traveling and picking up frequency information, and this can explain homeopathy as well. When information as a frequency or a vibration interacts with water, water can literally cluster itself. So the water molecules, let's say 60 of the water molecules will join together and form a geometric cluster. And in the same way that certain tuning forks, they're a certain shape and a certain structure, and they're going to sound out a certain note. And when I strike that tuning fork, all other tuning forks tuned to that same note will also start to vibrate and sound. Water can organize itself into geometry to hold on to a set frequency or a set vibration or a set note. Wow. And all of that is inside of the water that we drink from nature, but unfortunately from a tap, right? Tap water then would be holding potentially not only poor chemicals, right? Detrimental chemicals, toxins, but also detrimental frequency information too. And really quickly, water naturally, when it never moves in a straight line. It despises straight lines. This is Victor Schauberger really who brought this to our awareness. Water meanders. And we think the general people who have researched this would think, well, I could make stuff move faster if we force the water through a straight line. And that's not the case, because as water meanders, it vortexes itself. As it vortexes itself, it cools. And self-sustaining system where it can essentially accelerate itself, feed itself its own speed, accelerate its own speed. And so that vortex serves a huge purpose. And so the journey of that vortexing water to get to the spring is not only picking up, it's obviously a way that it can meander to the surface, but that implosion in and of itself, picture I'm certainly people see maybe an image of the biofield, right? Where there's this implosion point. Implosion is a gathering of energy. So anytime you have something that vortexes, it's gathering energy and information, and the water is doing that as it vortexes itself to the surface where we can find it as a spring. Our blood is designed to vortex because it's not just a delivery system. It's literally picking up information to deliver that information, not just, let's say, oxygen to the tissue. So this concept of the vortex I found to be very, very fascinating, which is why I was really happy to hear that you vortexed your water, because I think that's a really key component of transforming the water that we drink.
Definitely. So I've got a little device which does all the vortexing for me, but there are simpler ways you can do it. I mean, mine's got like copper and magnets and things, but you could literally just get like a coffee frother or just do that, just spin it around, and it just creates, as you say, that structure within the water. Because again, it's that hydrophilic surface. Water's going to go where it's loved. It's not going to go where it's not loved. So as it goes through that process, it's always going the places where it wants to go. And it kind of guides itself because of that. I guess it's picking up on that frequency, so to speak. And it's interesting because I had Dr. Stephen Hussey on a couple of podcasts ago.
Great.
And he was explaining about how the heart's not a pump, that it's a vortexer, because the blood gets vortexed. And he said that the reason why it works like that, and this was a beautiful way that he put it, and I'm going to completely ruin it, I'm sure, but he said it's because we come from the sea, and it was the only way that we could bring the sea with us in ourselves through our blood, is the fact that it needed to move in a vortex pattern, because that's how the ocean works, with waves and with other types of things. And I thought it was a very beautiful kind of poetic way of putting it, to bring the sea with us as we kind of went out onto land, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. I found that, okay, so let's tie this to minerals really quickly, because just clinically speaking, I have found that we have certain parts of our body, certain fluids in our body that are internal oceans. Anything that truly flows. So the blood, the lymph, the interstitial fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, so fascinating that those things that truly flow mimic the same mineral composition as the ocean. Whereas this structured water, this exclusion zone water, it's almost like it's our internal land minerals. So I find that it's really important for people to get a balanced blend of ocean minerals to support the blood, our internal oceans, and land minerals, which would be things like humic or fulvic based minerals. And those have an affinity for so it's like we're basically a microcosm of what we're experiencing on Earth, right? We've got the ocean waterways, we've got the land with the soil, we've got the microbes. And if we start to view our body's needs from that lens as well, it simplifies things.
It does. It really does. And it always leads me to that thought process I've had recently, which is people say you can't get healthy in the same environment that makes you sick. And when people are suggesting that, the initial thing everybody will think is external environment, which is right. You can't get healthy in the same external environment that made you sick, but the environment that you take with you wherever you go is you. So you have to also then look at that internal environment and get that, as you say, that balance of the sea minerals and the earth minerals and everything else that kind of goes with it. And I often find with clients, if I say to them, right, we need some humic or fulvic or something like that, and they might get some kind of reaction to it. They might get a little bit like a Herx reaction or something. It's like, well, that's telling you something. That's your body telling you that you're not in a very good state right now to be receiving either the level that you're taking, or you're just basically, your structured water is just not what it needs to be. The cells aren't functioning the way they need to. We need to focus on that. So when you're working with your clients and you say you've had this massive, profound change in them just by speaking about the water side of things and recommending these types of things, and what are the things that you say when it comes to the water? What do they have to do?
Yeah, sure. So the water, I view hydration through 3 different kind of interlocking circles, if you will. We obviously have to drink good quality water. That absolutely matters. But what the water that we drink actually first hydrates our blood. It doesn't go to the cells. And so to support the water inside of the cells, this gelled exclusion zone water, 2 things are needed. We need to optimize the water that our mitochondria make. So, mitochondria, I think people have heard of them and know that they make ATP. Very few people recognize that they also make water, which is essential. And then that exclusion zone water, Jerry Pollack's lab found that you can essentially charge that water or expand that water back to a healthy vitality through certain exposures. So I also then do things that optimize exclusion zone water that's already there. And through those 3 kind of different viewpoints of hydration is how I really start to address the water inside of us. Mm-hmm. in a client that might herx from, switch them over to an ocean-based minerals to make sure that their blood and their lymphatic fluid is hydrated. Because if the fulvic and the humic is going into the interior of the cell and has an affinity to, yes, drop off minerals, but also pull out toxins, if there's not enough flow through the lymph and the blood, those toxins don't have a place to go. And so the immune system then recognizes them as something that they need to try to dismantle. And so that's going to create that herxing sensation. Sometimes with the herx, this is the intelligence of the human body, because sometimes with the herx, people get a fever. And what is a fever but infrared? So could that possibly be an infrared source, which will help to charge the exclusion zone water inside of us and help that whole process just facilitate it at the correct pace that the body needs? Just interesting stuff. So yeah, so I kind of do it through 3 different tiers right there. And that really seems to, it seems to be supportive.
I'd never thought about a fever being the infrared of the body in that way. Wow, that's incredible. Okay. So you discovered all of this just after, was it you say your first child was born?
Yes.
Yes. So how did you find implementing this into a family situation? How did that go initially? And how is it now in comparison?
I was just kind of a lone wolf for a little while there. I would just go outside in the morning. I would do my thing. I would, when I could, I would either push baby on a walk, or I'd be able to take my own walk in the morning, and I would block the artificial light at night. I got a really good quality, countertop filtration, right? So I would just say, hey, this would be probably the ideal water to drink, because we have horribly fluoridated water where we live, amongst other things in it, obviously. And so that's where it started. It was me. And it was me doing it and just modeling it for a long time, because number one, I was tiptoeing into this. Like I didn't have any correct answers. So I didn't feel comfortable to be like, you should. I never feel comfortable to say you should, right? That I hate that word should. But so I probably spent 5 years just, okay, sunset, I'm going to put my blue blockers on. When I wake up in the morning, I'm going to put my blue blockers on. I'm going to turn my phone screen to red. I'm going to go outside. I'll, do this to the water. If people want to drink and do this to the water, they can stir it if they want, those types of things. But then my family saw me just get healthier and healthier and healthier and healthier. And I feel way more thriving. I'm 44 as well. And I feel better than I did in my mid-20s for sure. Yeah. And so I think it was just through that modeling behavior. Now at nighttime, if we're going to, let's say, watch a family movie or a sporting event that we want to watch, and it's the middle of winter and it's dark out, and my family just grabs their blue blockers. Like I don't have to say anything. And they want to, because we've been to hotel rooms, and we can change like the backlighting on our TV and stuff like that to make it so that it's not super bright, but we'll still wear our blue blockers. But we've been to hotel rooms where you can't touch the settings, right? And you turn on the TV and it's literally like blasting you with the brightest light, it's like you got a spotlight on you. And all of us will be like, whoa, like we'll quickly scramble, like turn it off, get your blue blockers on, because we viscerally know that doesn't feel good for us. So it's been really cool, because I recommend model it, right? Model it just because it's supporting you. And if people see the changes and shifts it makes in you, they might be more likely to want to do it themselves. And that's been my experience. My husband now goes out at sunrise. He earths, he grounds. We all love getting full body sunlight exposure. They love drinking the high quality structured water. No complaints about, hardwiring the house or turning off, the Wi-Fi router if we have it on. I mean, so it's just really, I think, been a smooth transition, but I was a lone wolf for quite some time.
Yeah, I think it's a nice message to have out there, because if obviously people are listening, they're thinking, I want to try this, but they're obviously in a family setting. They're probably then thinking, well, what do I do? If I'm in the lounge at night and I want to turn all the lights off, but my husband or my wife wants to put them all on, what do I do? So, okay, we'll just grab your blue blockers, maybe wear like something long sleeved or long legged, so that way then you're protecting all the non-visuals and stuff. So there are ways around this, definitely. But there was something that I want to touch upon, which we spoke about off before we started recording. And obviously with the going out, getting the sun and seeing the light and grounding and all those types of things. And it's been in the press a lot quite recently that the UK government has decided that they are going to spend £50 million on trying to dim or block the sun. So you mentioned a really cool device which you have purchased and use. to help with that type of situation with the chemtrailing or the, what do you call it now, the geoengineering? Because obviously it's known to the world now as geoengineering, because obviously chemtrails has got that conspiracy theorist connotation to it. So what is this device? What does it do? I'm fascinated to hear what it does.
So this was the work of Slim Sperling. As I started to kind of understand water, I connected to kind of ether and ether physics and the biofield. And Slim Sperling figured out that you could, well, I've got a tensor ring, just as a small example, but this is not the device. But he figured out that you could wrap copper together in a certain length that has measurements related to the pyramids. And when he would have clairvoyants observe the energy coming from it, it was this beam of light coming from it that they said was a higher harmonic of natural light, essentially. So it's essentially a healing light. And, they did decades worth of experiments. What happens when you shine this on something? What happens to the water if you apply this, put this around a water glass? Can we see changes in the structure of the water? And so, now there's decades worth of experience from clinicians using the tensor rings in order to help support healing. Slim then interlocked a bunch of tensor rings together, basically, and his website is called Light Life Technology. And so, you can take essentially 3 of these or more and put them around, and then hold them, essentially put a crystal and a Tesla coil in the middle. And that in and of itself will do something called harmonize the environment, change the how the body responds to non-native EMFs. But he took it a step further. He developed this in Denver, where there was a time in the 80s and 90s where Denver in Colorado was the most polluted city in the country. They had this black pollution, this black cloud basically over them at all times. And they figured that they could actually run frequencies. So you can essentially plug this into like a CD player, for example, or a frequency generator. When it's not plugged in, you get maybe a shield, a harmonizing shield of about 100 meters. When that's plugged in, it's now all of a sudden 50 kilometers. It's just massively wider. And what I have found is I run certain frequencies through it that I think are really, really beneficial, Schumann resonance being one of them. And if you had little chemtrails or those really light clouds that are not natural, you can really start to affect a change and have them start to clear out. It won't change if it needs to rain, if it's a natural cloud, that will not be affected. But if it is an unnatural cloud, amplifying that frequency into the environment, it's how they cleared the pollution in Denver. They literally transformed the pollution in that city. And so just on our small scale, we can maybe do something as well, just in our individual neighborhoods, to help support the natural clouds.
That's incredible. That reminds me very much of electroculture kind of approach as well.
Oh yeah, I do electroculture too. Like I have my plant back here. My buddy, who's been with me for about 20 years. I do electroculture as well, and that's a very similar concept. It's like this coiling effect of essentially drawing energy, or you can project that energy. It's ether physics.
So for people that don't know what the ether is, what is the ether?
It's God. It's consciousness. It's the finest fluid that literally makes up everything in just varying densities. So the physical things that we feel, that we can feel and touch and see, those are just the ether organized into atoms. And those atoms are then obviously interlocking to make what we can physically see. But it's one fluid, it's one field. It's now being called the 0 point or the quantum field, which I have mixed feelings about, because I think I like to honor the fact that it's been known for millennia that there's one fundamental substance that makes up the entire universe. But that's what it is. It's a field that literally makes up everything we can see and can't see. It connects you to me right now. Like, we're physically obviously connected through this ether, and experiments have been done thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, where if I send a healing intention to water that you have in your hand, a glass of water that you have in your hand, you can see before and after differences instantaneously in what can happen. And it's through this field of energy that we're all connected. Therefore, those are the adages of all is one. We're all one. We're all connected. It's through this field. Wow.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I haven't delved into the ether, the science of it, as much as what I should. I know it from the esoteric side of things. I know it from the Eastern side of things and the meditation, and obviously the Reiki healing as well. Like, we use distance healing in Reiki to do that. So somebody can be on a complete opposite side of the earth, and I can, through intention and obviously visualization, send the healing energy to them to do something specific, and it will work. The next day they'll message me like, did you send me healing last night? I'm like, yeah, I did. And they're like, oh, because I could feel it. Like when I woke up today, I could feel like the warmth on that particular area, like the knee or the shoulder or whatever the case may be. It's quite an incredible field to go into. And that's, if I remember correctly, that's what scientists used to argue about what's in space, like what's in the space within space, if that makes sense.
It was a vacuum for a while there,
Yeah.
and it's not a vacuum. It's
not a vacuum anymore.
Plenum, it's full. It's absolutely full.
It's amazing how we, in modern society, need science, one, to prove that nature works, but two, to obviously then prove that what all these ancient cultures have known without the science all this time. So if you look at like the Egyptians and Sumerians and what have you, they all knew this without having to have science prove it. They just knew. And we need to have science to prove it, which is kind of weird, but also cool at the same time, because then we can explain it, I guess, in a way, but without actually just having to understand it. So
we're just very left-brained these days. Back in the day, 2,000 years ago, one of the worst punishments you could give someone was to kick them out of the community. Because that feeling of pain of just being disconnected, and very much more right-brained and understanding that interconnection, the intuitive side, we're so left-brained that we need a left-brained language to be basically to validate these things. And when I think we can use that language, right or wrong, the language of science, in order to help people understand this, I think it just opens more people up to what the possibilities are.
Yeah. I think we've just got that inquisitive mind where we want to know how everything works. But unfortunately, that always then makes us want to take it down to that one single thing, right? We'll find that compound, then we've got to take it down to the next level, then the next level, then the next level. It's like, well, it doesn't work like that. Everything works in unison in that kind of that entourage effect. You can't just take it away from itself and then just do that because it's now missing all of these things that you took it away from. It needs to have the whole thing. It'd be like taking the heart out of the body and expecting the body to still function while the heart's like over there on a slab somewhere. It's kind of not gonna work that way. Right? It doesn't work that way. The body's a little bit more complicated than that. Carrie, listen, thank you so much, my darling, for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it. It's been an absolute honor to hear your story, and I hope this has added so much value to everybody at home listening or on their journeys wherever they're going. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Carrie Bennett. Carrie, before you do go, I'm going to pop it all in the show notes anyway, but where can people find you?
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'd love to come on again. We can talk ether physics. It'd be so much fun.
I'd love that.
You can find me at carriebwellness.com. That's where all of my practitioner and general courses are. And then my hub is Instagram, Carrie B Wellness as well on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, I'll pop all of that in the show notes below. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Carrie Bennett. And until next time, stay blessed, stay well.